Now, we would like to invite Mr. Paul Lee, Acting University Librarian of Hong Kong Baptist University Library, to introduce our keynote speaker for this plenary section. Mr. Lee, please.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Paul Lee. I'm the Acting University Librarian of the Hong Kong Baptist University. I'm very honored to chair this plenary fourth session on sustainable services. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to just give a thanks to HKUST and CUHK for organizing the conference. It's been very wonderful, and I've been well, thank you. I've been learning a lot, and it's been very enlightening to me. So I hope you also enjoy the rest of the program today. Now, our keynote speaker is Mr. Andy Prisner, who is the director of Andy Prisner Training and Consultant. And the title of the keynote speech today, this afternoon, is Employing UX Research Methods to Design Better Library Services. Just a little background about Mr. Prisner. He's a freelance trainer and consultant specializing in user experience, social media, leadership, and team building, working with academic and public libraries, universities, and public sector in the UK and Europe. His interest and expertise in user experience led to his creation of the International UX in Libraries Conference and his management of Cambridge University Libraries Future Lib program, which employs ethnography and human-centered design to explore and deliver innovative services and products, such as the hugely successful Space Finder project. His new book, User Experience in Libraries, will be, well, actually, it's published this month. Am I correct, right? Yeah. So Andy was the president of the European Business Schools Librarians Group from 2014 to 2015, and also the chair of the UK's Business Librarians Association from 2006 and 2010. And so without further ado, let's welcome Mr. Prisner.
Okay, hello everyone. Hello. It's very interactive already. Wow. It will get more interactive as we go on. That's a threat. That was a great long introduction. I really enjoyed it. It made me sound quite important. I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to be here in Hong Kong, and particularly to be with you here at this conference, which I've thoroughly enjoyed. My talk is about user experience research methods in libraries. Well, I'd just like to say my experience as a user of this conference has been uniformly excellent. And I'd just like to particularly thank Louise and Diana, who I can't see, Alice, all the different people who I've worked with to make this happen. But I particularly want to thank a group of people who I don't think have been mentioned yet, the IT support guys, who have just been so amazing. Yeah. Okay, and so to UX. Why am I standing here talking to you about UX today? Well, 3 years ago, I connected via Twitter and via blogs with two people. One of them was called Bryony Ramsden, and she's based in the UK. Another was an anthropologist, Dr. Donna Longclow, who is based in North Carolina. And these two guys together, although across the Atlantic on different sides, inspired in me a recognition that I was not doing enough user research. And the user research that I had been doing for 20 years in libraries was not going to show me very much, wasn't going to tell me very much. It certainly wasn't going to help me to design better library services. So I kind of had what I call a road to Damascus moment. It wasn't quite spiritual, but it was certainly a moment where I suddenly saw the light, and I was realizing there was other opportunities in order to gather information about my users. A whole world of methods that I had not been talked about before. It led, as we've already heard, to me setting up an international conference so I could gather people together who was also interested in this topic. It also led me to quit my job, which was quite brave. It feels less brave now I'm further away from that point. And I suggested a new job, to the Central University, and they said, yeah, why not? We'll try it. So that's my part-time role at the university, delivering UX innovation projects. Okay, so this moment in which I saw there was a new possibility. What these methods are all about are about how users actually experience our services, not what they tell us, because they don't always tell us the truth. They sometimes tell us the things that they think we want them to say. It's about a more holistic approach. It's about recognizing that they've got lives beyond the library and that we need to think about how library fits into a wider landscape. It's taking a more holistic approach. Now, I did start to wonder, right, I've been doing this stuff for 20 years, and very, very few people have ever talked about anything to do with this. And it felt to me like a bit of a conspiracy. Had all the library schools all over the world decided that they were only going to teach survey design? Because I'd not heard about this stuff. And yet, these methods are not new. You might think, oh, this is just the next newfangled thing. The reality is these methods have been around for years and years and years. It's just we've not been using them. Partly, perhaps, because we've not been taught about them before. So, was it a conspiracy? Or were they just being lazy? These teachers? Or complacent, or both? Perhaps a mixture. Perhaps, I suspect, most of them just didn't know about these methods. Whatever the reason for that, librarians have traditionally only relied on surveys when researching users. I will talk about focus groups, because I know some of you will have done focus groups. Hands up if you've done focus groups before. Well, that's about half the room. Hands up who's done surveys. Come on, that should be all hands. I don't believe you. Okay, so surveys. My boss, my ex-boss, Steve, used to regularly get very frustrated with me. He's like, Andy, what the hell is the problem? What's the problem? You're getting fantastic results in your surveys. Everyone loves your library service at the business school. Why are you wanting to find out more information? It's like, well, yes, 90% of them say it's great, but it's meaningless. It doesn't really tell me anything interesting. It doesn't tell me how to improve the service. And maybe they're just saying that because they think it's what we want to hear. And I knew there were so many things that were wrong with the service. Like people couldn't get access into e-books, people hated the space, there weren't enough desks, but everyone was so polite and friendly. And I think it's partly because as a staff team we were very friendly, that we just got really great survey results. And I wanted to find out what I could do differently. How else could I find out about what was going wrong? So let's talk a bit more about surveys. I will not stop until I convince you that they're evil. Well, not evil. No, they're a necessary evil. I should say, before I carry on, that I'm not saying you ditch surveys altogether. You should definitely keep surveys, but I think you should be doing other things as well. The pros. Let's be positive about surveys for a minute. They're quick to produce and fill in. As someone said to me the other day, you can just go tick, 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 tick. But therein lies a problem. If you're just doing tick, 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 you're not thinking about it necessarily. They're really easy to analyze. They're so easy to distribute, you don't need to think about that. And everyone knows what they are. What are the cons? You'll be surprised to see this is a longer list. They're often just filled in by people who are going to use the library anyway, positively predisposed to library services, the people who like you anyway. Or, on the opposite side, those people who have just had a bad experience and they want to complain. So it's not a balanced picture. There's a huge chunk of people in the middle who are kind of like, nah, I don't know, I don't really care. It's fine. And they're not going to fill in the survey. Also, as I've said, self-reporting is hugely unreliable. People don't tell you the truth. How many people here have filled in a survey and said some things that aren't necessarily the truth? Probably about half, at least, I'd imagine. Also, we focus very much on quantitative data when we do surveys. It's about gathering stats and scores. Yes, we put some comment boxes in sometimes, but often they're at the end of the survey, almost like an afterthought. And those white boxes at the end of the survey, those big gaping boxes, just at the point when you've run out of the energy to live, you think, oh, now I've got to fill in a real big box at the end? No. And they're often left blank, aren't they? And when they are filled in, we don't actually code up that data in any way. We may use some of the quotes in an annual report, and we may use them in a certain way, but we don't actually start to analyze the qualitative data. We also are very guilty of asking closed or leading questions. I do this all the time. I used to do this all the time. I shared with the people who were at the UX workshop the other day that my favorite leading question of all time was, do you like the fact that e-books mean that you don't have to carry heavy books around? Just trying to get people to like e-books, and it's just naughty. They're really frustrating to complete as well often. Sometimes you think, oh, this is my moment to try and say what I want to say. They're too long. And we have a very real problem. And it's kind of funny, survey fatigue. People put pictures up of people, stabbing themselves in front of PowerPoints. But, and it's the same for surveys. That's the same sort of fatigue where people are kind of like, oh, really? Another one? It is a real problem. There are too many of them. I'm wandering around, so you can't photograph me. And they don't reveal how users truly behave, and they don't tell us how they feel either. He got me. Also, what people say, what people do, and what people say they do are entirely different things. This is my favorite quote ever, and it's so true. I'm going to tell you the story of New Coke. Does anyone know about New Coke? Yes. Oh, we have some experts in the house. I'm just old. Season's a better word. Thank you, Meredith. So 30 years ago, in April '85, the Coca-Cola company announced they were going to change their centuries-old formula. It was 99 years old or something. And they got this new, sweeter, syrupy recipe, and it had a better, sweeter taste. And it was at the time when Coke and Pepsi were really at war with each other. So they were trying to find competitive advantage. They'd done market research. They talked to 200,000 consumers and made them do a taste test to see whether they preferred the new formula. And they said they did. Coca-Cola were ecstatic. They were so excited. It's going to be an instant hit. We're going to have competitive advantage over Coca-Cola. Do you think that when they launched it, people liked it? No. The American public hated it. Hated it. In California, they collected signatures. In Seattle, they actually set up a hotline for people who are that upset. I'm phoning because I'm really upset about the new formula. And there was panic buying in San Antonio. People were spending £2,000 on old Coke before it went. Protest groups emerged. The Old Cola Drinks of America and Preservation of the Real Thing. In pursuit of the original Coke. They wanted it back. There were petitions. My favorite thing was, though, that when they went on these marches, they dressed their children in T-shirts which said, "Bring back original Coke or our children will never know true refreshment." Eventually, well, I say eventually, only about 2 or 3 months later, because the response was so strong, Coca-Cola decided to bring back original Coke. But they called it Classic, Coca-Cola Classic, like this can here. New Coke then became Coke 2. Sorry, I'm wrong. Original Coke was brought back as Coke Classic. And the new formula one they called Coke 2 in the hope that some people might buy it. They didn't, and they dropped it. So what does this tell us? What went wrong? Can 200,000 people be wrong? I think they can, and they certainly, this case study proves they can. They discovered that the preference that they stated in these tests was not enough. It was far more complex than just sitting in a room with someone saying, yeah, I prefer the taste of that. People had an emotional bond with the original Coke. It was a social thing. It was a personal thing, they discovered. And drinking it from the packaging particularly was a really different matter. People would go, whoa, that tastes wrong. That shouldn't be in that can. It just tastes really strange. And perhaps there was an element whereby they wanted to please the testers and say, yeah, we like this. I mean, it really does depend on how the testers talked to the consumers. Did they say, do you really like this new formula? And if they said it like that, perhaps people just said, yeah, I do. So, what people tell you they'll do is not necessarily what they will do. In this case, buying a product. In the case of libraries, they may not actually like your service very much. Shock horror. There's a sort of uneasy laughter then. Library survey data is not necessarily truth, is my point here. Unfortunately, we librarians love pie charts, don't we? Hands up if you love a pie chart. They're cool, aren't they? They look very pretty on a slide. I think I'm proving that. And we like data. We like to collect it. We're really good at collecting it. But what does it really tell us? When it comes to footfall stats, people coming in at the entry gate, that doesn't tell us whether someone had a good experience when they were actually in the library, does it? We don't know whether they met Mrs. Grumpy Librarian, or whether they met someone who didn't want to help them to get to the shelf and they spent ages looking for a book. We don't know how successful those visits were. Same goes for database visits. Database suppliers would often phone me up and say, look, on this trial product you had, Andy, 70 people downloaded those reports. And I'd be like, okay, but I don't know whether those views were actually successful. Did people actually really find anything useful for their essays or for their projects? I don't know unless I talk to them about it. So database stats as well don't tell you very much. What about high teaching scores? Now, this is a particularly difficult one for me because I used to revel in the fact that I'd get very high teaching scores. There was one course I did called Plagiarism and Referencing. Now, doesn't that sound like the dullest class in the world? Well, I'd really pepped it up. I'd put videos in there, I had interactive voting, all these different elements designed to get me a high score. Now, that's the key thing. I designed it so that people would clap and applaud and enjoy it. And they did. I got 10 out of 10 from all the MBAs for 2 or 3 years on the go. But every year, the MBA course office staff would phone me up and they'd say, Andy, did you actually teach the course this year? I'd be like, yeah, I got really high scores for it. They're like, yeah, because it's not gone in. They're all plagiarizing. So yeah, my course was really successful in terms of a teaching score, but the reality was no one was learning a damn thing. So what I had to do was change the course, make it duller, but also more academically robust. I scared people as well, which I'm quite good at. And I got lower scores. I got 7s and 8s rather than 9s and 10s. But people weren't plagiarizing anymore. So the interesting thing is a high teaching score doesn't equal learning, does it? So again, a stat that doesn't necessarily reveal the full picture. Now, I did mention focus groups. They're kind of a second choice after surveys, aren't they? That we like a survey. I'm just going to get a sip of water, and then I'm going to read through a typical focus group. This is my experience of focus groups. So what do you think of the library? It's nice, I like it. Any particular service you like? Most of them. What about the library staff? You're really nice. And a slight pause. Do I get pizza now? Have we learned anything? Steve Jobs said this, the late Steve Jobs, it's really hard to design products by focus groups. A lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them. And I think it's true of new library services. We kind of expect people to have very informed opinions about whether something's good or not. The reality is, in that environment, they're not going to really respond and give you much information. I also like this quote. Users don't think about libraries all that much. They use them, but they don't think about them. They've got much more interesting things to think about than how to help us improve our services. Do you know who said that? That was me just now, yeah. That's the first time I've said it publicly. I think we need to adopt new forms of user research, specifically UX research, user experience research. There's a whole new world of techniques out there that are waiting to be used, and I shared 12 of those techniques with people at the pre-conference workshop. And some of them are fun, some of them are weird, some of them are wonderful. What's common to all of them is that people really enjoy doing them. The students love getting engaged with them because they're so much more interactive and creative and inspirational. I'm going to go through just about 3 of them, just talk to you about some of them now. But before I do, I want to talk about the importance of ethnography as part of this. It all hinges on ethnography, which is all about spending time participating in a community, in a culture, and learning about it, and writing down information about it. It's from the Greek. which means it means writing culture, basically. Traditionally, ethnography is about studying indigenous people in far-flung places, anthropologists dressed in white, usually white men, unfortunately, as well, finding out stuff about communities. But now we're using ethnography everywhere, in industry and also in libraries. Ethnographic research techniques, spending time studying a community and looking into their habits, their routines, their lives. Fail. I really need an alarm sound at that point, some sort of awooga sound. What they will reveal, these techniques, is those things that fail, those touch points, those points at which the users interact with your library service where it's a bad experience, where things go wrong, whether it's the website, whether it's staffing, furniture, signage, all of those different things. Right, we're going to take part in this, you're all going to take part now in a psychic experiment. Could you all stand up, please? Okay. Shortly, you will be projecting your thoughts onto the screen, okay? What I want you to think about is what one touch point is currently failing your users the most at your home library. Is it your website? Is it signage? Is it staff? What is failing the most? So think that thought and project it onto the screen. You ready? I'll count you down from 5. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Whoa, thank you. You can sit down now. Okay, so from your minds, we find that websites are the biggest problem, then signage, then staff. A few of you thought of ebooks in the moment. Well done. These tend to be the main areas that there are problems. So what does ethnography involve? It's a jigsaw puzzle, and I'm going to take you through the different bits. It's about being interested in culture and understanding what drives people. Why are they together? Why do they go around in groups? It's about interview. That's one of the main methods. It's actually speaking to people, spending time one-on-one, talking to them and finding out what really drives them and getting through to the honest truth. It's about being really interested in details. It's also about not being too formal and structured about things. It's about an unstructured approach. It's about being social, but also being interested in social, interested in the relationships between people. It's about being holistic. It's about caring for the whole experience and understanding what that means and what that involves. It's about having a real interest in the context of the community you're studying and really getting to understand it. It's also crucially about observing people. It is about sitting there watching people. It may sound a bit odd, it may sound a bit creepy, but sometimes you have to sit and watch what people do. It's also about complexity as well. These things aren't straightforward. People behave in very strange ways. Human beings are incredibly complex, and we need to use these methods in order to uncover that complexity. Together, all those methods offer a more complete and complex, bigger picture of how our users live, how they behave, and what their needs are. We should seek to uncover complexity. Nothing in life is as simple as it appears. Our users and their behavior are no exception. So my first UX baby steps, when I initially found out about it, I thought, I'm going to try some of these methods out. They sound really cool. So 3 years ago, I started using them. I'm going to talk to you a bit about these initial techniques. I started tracking people moving around the library, which is called behavioral mapping. I did some cognitive maps and interviews to find out about people's wider learning landscape beyond the library. And I started putting up graffiti walls to see how people felt about the space. And they revealed, despite, remember, fantastic survey results, that there was massive problems in my library. They felt that the website was irrelevant and confusing. Eek. They felt that the library was laid out in a really inconvenient manner. And you could see from the way they walked that they would skirt around things. They would go from the ground floor to the top floor when they just wanted to go to the first floor. They were being inconvenienced all the time. There wasn't enough PCs. People wanted more PCs. And we kind of assumed, because these were rich MBA students coming to Cambridge, that they would just bring their own devices. BYOD, bring your own device, culture would be taking place there. No, they wanted to come to the library to use our PCs. And one of the reasons is they just didn't want to carry that stuff with them. They felt there wasn't enough opportunity for dialogue with library staff. They felt we used far too much jargon. Now, I thought we'd stripped out all the jargon, but no, they said it was still too complicated. There were massive aircon and heating problems. Who hasn't got those, though? Let's face it. Uncomfortable furniture, which we solved by adding loads of cushions and blankets. That was quite cheap, actually, as a solution goes. Staff were the main noise problem. You'll be surprised to hear that I was a problem with the noise. Yeah, we were noisier than the students. And unrealistic expectations of their activities, the things we thought they were doing, they really weren't. Whether it was using advanced search, whether it was doing the things on databases that they should have done, or how they were researching essays, we were completely in cloud cuckoo land. Okay, some of the techniques then. Observation. So recently I've conducted a project at Cambridge University where we've done 317 hours of watching people in 4 different spaces. Observing them over a set period of time at regular intervals, making extensive notes on what they're doing, what they have with them, who are they with, whether they take breaks, and recording their movement in the space and the occupancy of the room. And then all charting it as well. That's a behavioral map showing where people sat and where they moved to, and every few minutes writing down what they're doing. And 317 hours of those altogether provided some really interesting key themes that were emerging of activity and of behavior. The main results of this 3-month experiment. We found that removing seats actually increased occupancy of rooms. Now that sounds bonkers, and how does that work? But there was just too many chairs jammed in all the different rooms. And if we actually started removing some of the chairs, then more people would come into the space to sit down. It's a bit like going into a train carriage, or when you're on the metro, and you don't want to sit next to someone, so you kind of sit at the other side. It's a bit like that in reading rooms as well. We found that sofas didn't make people noisy or difficult or eat snacks necessarily. It just meant that people worked in a more serious, some people worked in a serious way in a more comfortable environment. Now this is Cambridge, they're very studious. I'm not saying this directly relates to where you work, but in Cambridge certainly sofas were just seen as a comfortable option. It didn't make them socialise. Well-being was hugely important. We heard earlier today about how natural environment affects behaviour and plants and views and everything. Well, we found this too, and we introduced lots of plants, and it increased people's well-being, it increased their productivity, and it increased the duration of their stay in the spaces, which was fascinating as well. People wanted a sense of control, they wanted everything to be personalised to them. People moved between different spaces during the day. We'd assumed that people kind of stayed put once they were set up for the day. Well, no, most people moved to 3 or 4 different spaces in the library during one day, depending on what activity they were doing or depending on how tired they were. Tables were the most popular items in a social area. We put these tables in thinking they're going to want to sit on the sofas and the comfy chairs. No, they wanted to sit at these tables. Loads of surprises came out of this research. And we discovered that we needed to provide more options for more relaxed environments to study. Cognitive maps. This technique's fun, as the pre-conference workshoppers will tell you. You draw a map of your learning landscape, where you study, how you study, who with. You have 6 minutes, 2 minutes with each pen, and you just draw a mental map of your experience. And this is an example. This example really shocked me. I used to say at the start of the year in library inductions, this library is your one-stop shop. You won't need to go anywhere else. This is it. So then I asked them to draw a map of their study experience, their learning landscape, and then blow me, they drew 4 different libraries. Mine was only one of those libraries. So, again, that really shocked me, it really surprised me, and it knocked some of the arrogance out of me as well. But also people using parks and bars and cafes to study in. We weren't the center of their lives, imagine that. Yeah. And these were a really useful way into a conversation, into an interview with these people, to talk about their map and their experience. Cultural probes. This has nothing to do with alien abduction. Should reassure you. It sounds like it, doesn't it? It's basically spending time gathering information ethnographically from people through diaries and through other techniques. We are doing one at the moment over a 2-week period. We're gathering all of this data, or rather they are, then they give it back to us, and we have a look through it and see what they've come up with. This is our current pack of materials that we've got out with people. They've got a diary, a USB stick for adding photos of their favorite study spaces. There are pens, task envelopes, writing paper, all these different things in a pack, sort of mission pack. And my colleague, David, has spent a long time handwriting in the diaries things that he wants people to do on specific days. We feel that if we make the effort to do handwritten work, then they are likely to do it in return. Because one of the problems with this method is, will they actually fill it in? We don't know yet, in this case. And we've also got things like they're going to write a love letter or a breakup letter to the library and send it back to us. Okay, affinity mapping. I'm going to talk about this in the context of the wider student experience and a little mini project I did. I was really interested to see where the library fitted into the whole student experience and what that landscape looked like. So I asked them, I got them in a room, 10 people, detail your entire experience of university life, warts and all. You cannot shock me with what you write down. I was quite surprised how honest they were with me, with one element per sticky note. And they said, use as many notes as you need. This is what they came up with. So the biggest category was social. They put sex on post-it notes. I was really surprised, but great. They were honest. This was part of their university life. Shopping, cinema, theatre, friends, music, drugs. Imagine. This is Cambridge. All these things were hugely important. This was the biggest category. This was the most important thing for them at university. Well, of course it was. Course came next. Their course. Essays, exams, practicals, project work, IT. You notice no mention of library yet. Readings, data, PCs, study space. Oh, phew. Library, finally. So that was part of the second biggest category, their course. What about day-to-day life? Yeah, that was important to them. All these different things came up. But there were things that we wouldn't necessarily have thought of. The problem of packing and unpacking things, being homesick, stress. Actually, that is not unexpected in Cambridge. All those different things. Getting from A to B, cycling. And then tech came in. All those things you'd expect were really important to them. And then what they were doing next, pursuing their academic career, writing up their CV, pursuing courses elsewhere. Those were the categories that they came up with during that exercise. You would have noticed that only 10 of those are kind of library related. I'd pick out these ones that all have relation to the library and what we can offer. So it's quite a small section. So we decided we were going to conduct a project that tried to develop something that was a library project that would be more relevant to a wider student experience. And that was Space Finder. I had to laugh. I was obviously in a really optimistic, happy mood when I supplied that information earlier about it. It was a hugely successful project. It sounds a bit much now, but it has actually been very successful. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about. So we did ethnographic research. We did diary studies. We did co-design workshops with students and librarians. And we did interviews with different groups of students. And we learned from this research that students in Cambridge were not finding spaces that matched their study preferences, and that those needs were really diverse. Now, anyone who was at the workshop on when was it, Wednesday? Does anyone remember how many libraries there are in Cambridge? There wasn't that many, Isabel. 124. Anyway, yeah, 124 libraries. And yet they were finding it difficult to find spaces that match their needs. Surely they've got loads of spaces. What's the problem? They like to study in different ways, in groups. alone. This thing of together alone, wanting to sit with someone else even though you're not working with them. People who want to sit in crowded, quiet reading rooms so they actually get stuff done because they feel guilted into it. But also people who want to sit where there's lots of background noise. The types of spaces used was really important. The fact that it was beyond libraries, which we knew, but we didn't realize the extent of that. So the idea was that Spacefinder would illuminate and uncover the university's many spaces and match them to all these study needs and preferences that we learnt about. So we set up a stall. We had a fake version of it as an app on a smartphone, and they started to use it. And we asked them, do you think this would be useful? Like, oh my God, yes, I wish I'd had this 3 years ago when I started. I can never find anywhere to study. And the response immediately, we knew we were onto something. And we kept testing it and changing it. And this is what we eventually came up with, which is available now. It's now in its second version, actually. And what it does is it gives the option for students to say how they want to study, what sort of atmosphere they want, and what facilities they want from the space. And then using GPS, it will show them the spaces nearby to where they're searching on their mobile device or whatever. Crucially, we included cafes and pubs and parks as well as libraries. The university librarian needed some convincing that this was a good thing to do. But yes, she got it. She understood it was the whole landscape. Cambridge Student newspaper loved it. The website that'll change your studying life forever. We thought that was a bit of a big claim. But yeah, we got great write-ups. And this from the Students' Union. One section I particularly love. The general response has been one of sheer astonishment that the university have helped producing something so up-to-date and relevant to student life. Not everyone at Cambridge was pleased to hear that. But the university library, we were all high-fiving each other. Yay, we did something good today. It's now an established part of Cambridge University life. If we took it away, there'd be an outcry. We've invested in it. Crucially, it was a really cheap product. We built it in 6 weeks. It's like John was saying earlier about not doing monolithic thinking, not building everything in. It was a prototype. We iterated, and we built it very cheaply. We're now investing in it because we realize it's something that's important. We've got different colored pins now, so you can tell which is a cafe, which is a library. We've got disability info. We have never had a better relationship with the Disability Resource Centre in Cambridge. What they were going to do was build their own product to show people where different spaces had different facilities and on what they could expect to find. They discovered Spacefinder existed, and they decided just to piggyback on the back of our product and add all this info. We've put on more information. Particularly, we've put on more images. Because why? Because students don't read text. They just wanted to see the pretty pictures, which is fine. You've got to find this stuff out, and you've got to respond to it. The reason why I think Spacefinder was successful was because it went beyond those 10 post-its I mentioned, those library ones. And it took in other things as well, like getting from A to B, like cycling. We put where bike racks were available. We put where cafes were. All these different aspects were covered by this product. So I urge you to create products, or think about creating products that go beyond just library and think about a wider landscape. If we'd just done surveys or just collected quantitative data, we would never have built something like that. And we had to piece that together using user experience research. I love this quote from Lorcan Dempsey. The library in the life of the user, not the user in the life of the library. That's what we need to be thinking about. So why does UX matter now? How long have I got? 15. Gosh, I'm doing okay. Why does UX matter now? I like this. Why? Why not? Who knows? Who cares? My mum? Yes, it's interesting, but so what? These are my reasons why it's more than a so what. I think we need to find out what our users really do, not just what they need. Students have higher service expectations than they ever had before. And that's for all different reasons. It's to do with the commercialization of society. It's to do with social media. It's the fact that you can now respond directly to a company online. You can do all these different things to have your voices heard. Students expect to have their voices heard more, and they have higher expectations of what they can receive. The other reason it's really important is that people who use the library and people who don't use the library are very happy to try out these methods because they're fun. They're really engaging. This is a really strong evidence-based approach. This isn't, gee, I think this is kind of a thing. This is hard data. Remember that prototype project, which we call Prototype? The full report is online if you want to search for it, Protolib. That was 317 hours of observation. That's hard data. We coded up everything we saw people do. It's not just woolly thinking this. This is strong, robust, pragmatic evidence that can help us to design services and products, crucially, that are more relevant and needed by students. Now then, needed doesn't mean they've told us they need it. Yeah? They might not be able to know what these things are that they need. If we'd said, oh, tell us what you need, they would never have come up with Space Finder in a million years. We had to discover that was something that was going to match their needs. And then, by God, they need it now. Now we've created it. Slight advertising slide. Apologies. Published 3 days ago. The reason why I think this book's important, not just because I wrote it, but because it's got chapters from library UX practitioners. It's got chapters from anthropologists. Donna has written for it. And Bryony, who's the other person who really got me into this stuff, has written a chapter. Designers have written for it as well. People who are using UX to design things for libraries. And this guy, who is probably the biggest advocate of UX in the library community in the US, Aaron Schmidt, has given me a very nice quote. We were enemies for a while because he got his book out first. But it's fine now. So, I urge you to use this whole new world of techniques. There's so many of them to try out. They're really fun. And more importantly, they'll give you real insight, real rich data. UX research is about exploring and understanding the experience of our users. This being so, why would you choose not to adopt these methods? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andy, for a very fascinating presentation, and it's been very enlightening. And now it's open to the floor. Any comments, observations, questions, feedback?
There's one over here.
Oh, yes, there is.
Very beginning, you mentioned that one of the methods you use is to observation. You observe how people use the library. And I don't know if there is any concern about privacy of users' behavior.
Yeah. For most of these methods, you do need to get ethical consent from people. And there should be a form that you get them to fill in and say how far the data is going to go, whether it's going to be published in a report. The one exception, though, is observation. I never do this for observation because you could just as well be a library assistant sat at a desk just seeing what was going on anyway. You're not writing down people's names. You're not actually interacting with them. So observation is the one case where I don't ever get ethical clearance for. The other thing that people find surprising is that no one ever objects to it. So we did 317 hours. We didn't get one complaint. We didn't even get one question like, what are you doing? It got to the point where I was kind of like, do you want to see what I'm doing? Because I'm really interested in it. No, we're studying. So yeah, it's not such a big hurdle as you think. People think, oh God, this is really invasive. And I think it's more about you as a librarian. You think, oh God, this is scary. But it's actually, it's fine in terms of students.
Hi, lots of data, lots of coding, lots of transcribing, I imagine. How many people, how many staff hours? I mean, it sounds like it was extremely labor intensive.
Yes.
I mean, wonderful and interesting too, of course.
Yeah. So But there's only 1.5 of us as part of the FutureLib program.
Okay, so you had
So
an
I'm part-time.
assistant.
I've got a full-time staff member now, as of January, when that project started, the prototyping project. Everyone else, we get them to do it as part of their day jobs. So they're coming from another library, they do volunteer work for us, just like an hour here or there. So we're just kind of mobilizing the library community we already have. Now, admittedly, in Cambridge, that's a large community. But at the same time, it's not that large when you think of all the people who resisted these techniques and didn't want to be involved. That was quite a lot of people. So, I know you picked that up. This is my water. Yes. It looked rather invitingly like a bottle of gin. You do need to resource it if you're going to do it properly. Interestingly, I had a very similar question, although it was more barbed, from a staff member a few weeks ago at Cambridge at an all-staff briefing. They said, how much does all this stuff cost then? I mean, just staff time alone, you know. And it's like, well, if you think about it like this, we probably spend about 0.1% of our overall budget on user experience research, on any sort of user research. Isn't that money well spent? Take a look at the success of SpaceFinder. Take a look at this. So I find it very easy to justify that spend. But you do need to get senior management buy-in. I was talking about this with Isabel over lunch, that you need to get people on board higher up to see that it's a good thing, because it is a lot of time if you're going to invest in it properly.
Any hands? Oh, yeah, there are a couple of them. Okay.
Hi, Andy. Really interesting presentation, and obviously a lot of value around looking at user experience and the library space.
Mm-hmm.
Have you used the same techniques for library staff, so kind of behind-the-counter staff?
It's really interesting.
Or potentially for IT services?
Yeah, Manchester University in the UK have previously only used this for student research. They're now doing a massive project with just their staff, because they realize that they need to kind of turn them around. So, yeah, we are planning to do more of this stuff. And a lot of the techniques I have used with staff, but not on a large scale as part of the program. But it is planned, yeah.
Another one? Over there. Right there. Yeah.
Hi, this is Gabi from UST. My question is, as you know, why librarians like to use survey? Because quantitative data is very easy to summarize and report. But using your method, we'll have a bunch of qualitative data. How do you help us start dealing with it?
Okay, so there's various techniques you can use. So NVivo is a product that you can use. You can put the qualitative data in, it codes it all up. Some people are fans of that. I'm not. I'm a fan of gathering key insights, chance observations, things that come out of the mix, themes that emerge, which have affinity mapped on a wall, and they point me towards things that are common amongst different groups. It's more of a design-based approach, which is why human-centered design was mentioned as part of the introduction. So I see it as less mathematical. But some people, some anthropologists, some ethnographers will use more mathematical techniques like NVivo in order to code it up. I kind of am more touchy-feely, and I find out more about aesthetics and people's feelings and developing that into products. I think we can get too hung up on data. That's my opinion.
Nice job, Andy. That was good stuff.
Thank you.
And thanks for questioning the value of surveys. That's an important message to get across. My question is, what is the overlap between the techniques that you've discussed and what's done in the commercial world to design services, retail spaces, and so forth? Presumably, you have very deep pockets there. Are there things you would do if you had the resources of a commercial enterprise to do this kind of work?
Yeah, so we borrow an awful lot commercially, particularly from retail, as you mentioned. So we work currently with a design consultancy who come in to sort of like say a few things in our ear and say, well, maybe you want to think about that. because you kind of do need that external focus, and the commercial sector are all over this stuff. They've been doing it for years. Corporate ethnography is a thing that's long established. They know exactly what products to build to make people into better versions of themselves. And that's what this is all about, really. And it can be the same for libraries. We can help people to use service or see services that can help them be a better researcher or be a better student. So yeah, hugely borrowed and hugely overlapping, which makes some librarians feel uncomfortable. So it's about, yeah, we can take these techniques, but yes, we've got a different outcome. We've got a different purpose here. It's not about making money.
And the second part was, is there an aspect of what they're able to do with the preponderance?
I think it's just the scale. It's ramping it up. We've started to scale it up now. We keep mobilizing librarians to do things. I think they're getting a bit tired. What again? We're doing something else? But also, it's a variety. It's so different that people get very excited about it. And there's a core group of people who want to do this stuff. But yeah.
Any other hands? Oh, they're way back.
It's JJ. I knew JJ would be a troublemaker.
So I saw on the Space Finder app that now you're talking about disability and doing disability stuff and working with Disability Office on campus. Can you talk a little bit more about what is the disability stuff that is now on the Space Finder app and how that relationship with the office developed and continues to develop? What else are you thinking about doing in terms of disability and the app?
I think we just knew nothing about what sort of icons we should use in terms of facilities. We didn't know what the different sorts of technologies were. We didn't even think really very hard about the fact that loads of people don't declare their disabilities. So it's just making this available in a way on this site that people could just find this stuff and didn't actually have to say, well, actually, I've got a disability. So it will tell you, if you search for different sorts of facilities, it will tell you which libraries match those needs. We've drawn the line when it gets really specific, though. For instance, we were asked to put foamy chairs as a specific because of people who I think it's fibromyalgia, and they have to have a specific sort of chair. So we drew the line when it got to the point where you'd only get one result coming up. But we're trying to, yes, offer as much information as we can. And as I say, the relationship with that office is so much better than it ever was.
Any other? I was told that we are doing okay in terms of time, so feel free.
I think that was enough questions.
Oh, there's one more. There's one more. Oh, okay.
Hi, very interesting presentation. Just want to ask about the future plan that you said you want to do it for staff as well. Any idea, are you also looking at the back office, like technical services, where if you observe, you will basically be at their office next to their chair?
Yeah.
How is it? How is it
it's about spending time with people and finding out how they live, how they work. It is about that stuff. It might sound a bit close and claustrophobic, but it is exactly that. So we'd spend time with those people and finding out where their pain points were, what things are failing, and then potentially developing products or services or just better understanding of how we should be communicating with those people based on what we discover when we spend time with them.
That won't be anonymous, though. That won't be anonymous.
No, we would need to get their consent for that. Yeah, they'd have to be happy to be involved. Yeah.
Any last minute? No? Say one? Say two. Oh, there. Last.
So for the cognitive maps that you had the students draw, did you have like a call for volunteers? Did you compensate them? Did you have a little workshop ahead of time before you asked them, so you could explain to them what you meant by a cognitive map?
Yeah, we didn't. Actually, it's important to say we never called it a cognitive map to them. We don't use any of these names when we have these things. We're just going to have a talk with you, or we're just going to do this. Just take this pen and do this. So we don't ever use any of the terminology with them, because that would be weird and terrifying. Draw me a cognitive map. What? No, we just want you to do some doodles. We'd buy them a coffee, and that was usually more than enough for them, for those small interventions. If it was a bigger intervention, where we actually, for like these diary studies that we're doing, then it's a £25 restaurant voucher and our undying love and respect. Okay.
Well, I guess I have to conclude this session, and I'm sure you would agree with me that that's a lot of information that we can take home and try to digest and hopefully practice it in something.
I hope so.
So, let us give a round of applause to Andy for this wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prisoner and Mr. Lee. Please stay. May I now invite Mr. Lee to present a souvenir to Mr. Prisoner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lee and Mr. Presner.